Hello, good evening, everyone. Good evening. How are you? Good to meet everybody after a long time. A lot of familiar names, a lot of new names. It's always a good sign. Yes, good evening to you, Satyajit, Gaurav, Pradeep, Jacob, an old student. You're very welcome, Chandrika. Is my audio getting through properly? My audio and video both? Just let me know. Okay, excellent. We'll wait a couple of minutes and we'll let everybody join in because we have a lot of ground to cover. And there are some very interesting and very important things which I need to tell you, which I have not shared before because there was no opportunity or the time. The opportune time to share these things is today. And I'll tell you why that is. How many students here have written mains ever? I know there are some of them are my mentees. But if you've written mains, let me know. I just want an overview of an idea of the level of depth which I can go into today. Because, like I mentioned, there's a lot to be covered today, a lot of ground. In fact, what I'm about to do today is probably worth perhaps 6 or 7 of these classes, and I'll tell you how the whole thing is structured. But essentially, yes. All right, no worries, no worries. Let us begin. Let us begin. I want to tell you about the genesis of this session, why it's being conducted today, just to give you an introduction, a briefing about what we're dealing with today. You see, I cleared the UPSC exam basically and primarily because of my skill at writing. And essay writing, answer writing were always my strengths. I had a good command. In fact, I would enjoy it, to be honest. And I never really had in an issue with it, but I have seen now over the years a lot of students have a major issue with it. And it's a very tricky type of situation because you can't really fix answer writing or the writing skill by knowledge alone because this is a skill. The rest of it is knowledge. I mean, we could read from D.D. Basu, we could read from Lakshmikant, and we could understand and gain a lot of information. That it doesn't necessarily translate into good writing. That's a completely different ballgame. Now, recent advancement and development in this whole experience is that earlier I had my own experience of a number of attempts, always did well in answer writing and all, and that's good. When you experience something again and again, you tend to internalize some insights. I will share these insights with you. But in this year, particularly, I mentored around 115 students who wrote mains. Now, most of these students would continuously give me their answer sheets to evaluate their essays, their test series questions which they had been undergoing from various institutes, and I would read these and I would then give them feedback, and these ran into the hundreds really. By the time I started this group, this mentorship program for the main student, particularly after prelims, and it lasted a couple of months, and it's still going strong. So in this period, enormous amounts of answers went through my own brain scan, and I realized that there are certain patterns. After having analyzed the UPSC paper also, some strange patterns emerge. I ran these patterns through a system and I will be sharing these insights with you today. Out of this group, about 20 students or so have qualified for the interview, and who have not qualified, those who have not qualified are working even harder. So they are going to qualify this year. And I should mention before we begin and go into the details that The answer writing skill is one thing, the knowledge part is a separate thing entirely. Let's not mix them. They will come together in the end. Once you approach both things properly, you've acquired enough knowledge, enough at least to clear prelims. You've acquired enough knowledge of writing, enough to write what you have learned. Then when these two come together, then you have a chance in mains. It's a different type of challenge. Okay, I hope and I suppose that you can appreciate that. So now, what's going to happen today? I will begin by discussing certain patterns in the question paper itself. I need to make sure you understand what you are dealing with as far as the mains questions are concerned, what type of questions are asked. And also, again, this is something which comes from experience after having seen hundreds. The test series of many institutes that I saw, that students would send, were not representative of the UPSC paper. A simple test, if you want a simple test of analyzing the quality of any set of questions, does the question start with what? If the question starts with what, it is probably not at the UPSC level. UPSC barely ever starts a question with what. They don't ask that question, and I will demonstrate that. I put the entire UPSC paper through a basic AI system, well, not AI, a basic keyword generator, and I will show you that they don't use the word what. They use different words, different operative words. They don't use the word elaborate in the mains paper. They don't use the word enlist. They don't use the word enumerate. They may use elaborate sometimes. They will use the word discuss. They will use the word comment, analyze, elucidate. Okay. If your test series, yes, it's going to be recorded, Dheeraj. If the test series is starting questions with what is this, what is that, it is not at the UPSC level. Maybe it is graduating towards that level and you will ultimately arrive at that level, but it's probably not there. So that's one thing. I will be discussing some hidden patterns that have been noticed. I will be taking the example of the 2022 paper of mains as my template. We will be discussing many questions you will see, and many of these I will ask you to write today. So as I go into it, make sure that you either have a paper or a pen with you, or you have your keyboard ready, because I will ask you to type, and I will request and I'll expect your inputs, and I'll see them in the chat. It is already live streaming in front of me, so we'll have that sort of an exercise going into it also. You will probably write a few introductions today before we are done. After these hidden patterns, I am going to discuss what skills are required and how to acquire these skills for excellent answer writing. Then I will get into these individual subjects. And I will touch upon what is interesting. There are overarching themes in these subjects. In polity, in economics, in science and tech, there are these overarching themes that can give us a really good grip or a framework about how to structure our answer. I will be getting into those, and we'll be going into the details, you might say, of some subject, although obviously we won't be able to do it to a large extent. Okay, and the session will end with a list of how exactly to execute all of these insights into your practice and how to structure your own progress path going forward. That is the tentative plan. Ladies and gentlemen, like I mentioned, a lot of ground to cover. Buckle up and let's begin. The hidden pattern. Some of the hidden patterns. But let me first, before I do that, let me show you something interesting. Do you know what this is in front of you? Do you know what this is? This is a word cloud of GS paper 1 of this year. I took all the words of GS paper 1, all of the question paper, and I ran it through this system. And it tells you which words appear more frequently. It gives us a good analytical point of view, a better perspective than we can otherwise get by just gauging it. Word cloud. This is a word cloud, correct? And you can ignore the word India or Indian. You can ignore it. Doesn't matter, because obviously we know that that's part of the syllabus. Notice the word which is highlighted the most. That word is discuss. See these words. This is GS1. This is essentially history and geography. Numerous primary, famine, architecture, temple, These are words which appear, these are keywords. British, colonial, no surprise there. The word discuss was used thrice. It was the third most frequent word used. It was the third most frequent word used in the whole paper after the word India and Indian. So that you can ignore. Most of the analysis is based on analysis like these. Again, this is GS paper 2 word cloud that you're seeing. Put the whole GS paper 2 into the cloud generator, and this is what we get. Again, you see discuss is mentioned, comment is mentioned. These are the key operating words apart from a lot of polity-based keywords that you can see. You can see legislature, election, Sri Lanka, etc. These were all questions which were asked. And when you see it like this, you realize that it's actually interesting because it tells you that there are patterns. This is GS paper 3. What you see now in front of the screen is GS paper 3, keyword cloud. And I'll tell you more about this. After all of this analysis, what is the key insight? Key insight 1 is the UPSC appears to be always biased towards width. They are not going into the details. Mostly, they are testing the width of your knowledge. Now, this may seem trivial to you. This may seem very obvious, but let me prove it to you. See what's going to happen here. These are the first few questions of GS paper 1 this time. Notice question 1. Notice question 1. How will you explain the medieval Indian temple sculptures represent the social life of those days? How will you explain that medieval Indian temple sculptures represent the social life of those days? There are a number of interesting things here. This pattern is repeated constantly in all three papers. Not only this time, previous time, and the year before that. And so it's likely that it will happen again. See that they are not asking you about the Sanchi Stupa. They are not asking you about the features of the Konark temple. They are not asking you about the particular architectural achievements of the Indus Valley civilization. They want to know how the temple architecture of the medieval period, which is broad, see they're focusing on the width, is impacting another system, which is the social cultural system. How does that represent? How did that happen? Now here, let me ask you an interesting question. Do you think this is an easier question to answer or a more difficult question to answer? Suppose there is an alternative question and they ask you something about the temple of Konark, very particular knowledge you would need to have to answer it correctly. If you either know it or you don't, right? Do you think this is easier or more difficult? Ankit thinks it's easier. Sonalika thinks it's easier. That's interesting. That's quite interesting. That's quite interesting. It is most definitely not easy. It is not easy. It is much more difficult. Instead of asking about one, they have asked you about all. You can't explain this well enough without citing 3 or 4 examples and then corresponding to the temple architecture, correspond that temple with the social situation at that time and whether there was a caste system or not, or whether there was a matrilineal system or whether it was a matriarchal system, and how, if at all, it was represented in the temple. It's harder. It is asking you to have knowledge not only of the architecture, but of how the architecture corresponds to social situations there, which is normally. Now again, notice, you may have all seen Bipin Chandra, the old NCRT. You may have seen that. If you haven't seen it, then you will surely see it, sooner or later. You will see it. What you find there is sections. It's usually sectioned. The 18th century society and culture will be in one place. 18th century architecture is a completely different ballgame. Maybe not always mentioned together. They ask you this here. This is just the first question, by the way. They are not picking and choosing. This is completely arbitrary. I just took the first 3 questions to demonstrate this. See the second one. See the second one. Why did the armies of the British East India Company mostly comprising of Indian soldiers, win constantly against more numerous and better equipped armies of the Indian rulers? Give reasons. Is this better or easier than answering why did the Marathas lose XYZ war? Why did they lose the Anglo-Maratha wars? What were the reasons? What were the reasons that the revolt of 1857 did not gain a critical mass? They may have as well asked you about particular battles. No, they asked you about the military structure of the British armies or other reasons which may have influenced. It's not easy, it's difficult. I'm telling you, it's difficult. This is why you get out of 10, 3 marks, 4 marks. And so the average marks which people get in mains is about what, 35, 40% perhaps? And the topper would probably get about 50, 55 at most. These are hard questions. The point I'm trying to prove is that there is an illusion sometimes. You see a question like this and you think of it as a commonsensical, and you may assume wrongly that it is commonsensical, or because it is broad, I can deal with it. This is not an essay. In essay, they are abstract. That's why I want to emphasize this. In essay, those concepts are abstract. We can play around with them. Here, we cannot play around with these ideas. Either you understand them, not only know them, understand them, and then know them. Of course, you would need both. Okay? You require both, and I'll tell you more. I'll tell you more. This is going to get interesting. The final example, now that we are on it. Why was there a sudden spurt in famines in colonial India since the mid 18th century? They didn't ask about the Bengal famine. They did not ask about any atrocities, no Lord Curzon, no particular event, no particular reformer. Why were famines more common than they were? What were the reasons? Maybe the British and their policies were unsuited. Maybe we had no disaster management, or they had no disaster management. Maybe there was infighting. Maybe they were being forced to grow cash crops. But all these reasons are not easy to find in one place. Maybe you find, maybe the student of history optional will find these obvious, but even I would find it, I would be hard pressed to write the exact points that are required for this. So this is not easy. You're right, of course, your points are correct. Vijaya is saying indigo cultivation. Lokesh, you are right about the word count, and that is what, again, we are not focusing on why it is difficult. We are not worried. We will make it easy. We are focusing on what it is at the moment. Once we understand that, the reason we are having this class now and not immediately before mains is that we can structure our preparation accordingly. We will use the benefit of hindsight. Yes? Isn't that the idea? Isn't that what ideally should be happening today? And that is what we will try to do. Width is long, Aditya, but that is the requirement. You cannot bargain with the UPSC. That is what they will want. Not only are they asking for width, they are asking for depth also. You cannot not know medieval temple architecture. You cannot ignore the social structure of the time if you want to answer that question correctly. No question about that. There is no way. Yes? Right. The other thing, questions are biased towards width. I have told you about this. Most questions are about interdependencies between systems. Another bias that I have noticed constantly every year, I find the same thing. Same thing. They are always asking about certain systems. Bias towards system thinking and big picture. Let me ask you something interesting now. Read the first question. Discuss in detail the photochemical smog, emphasizing its formations, effects, and mitigations. Explain the 1999 Gothenburg Protocol. Which system is being spoken about? Which system is being spoken about here? Yes, it is forever getting tougher as the level of information and the knowledge dissemination is getting easier. Obviously, the questions will get tougher. Earlier, it was hard to obtain the basic information for the first place. Now it's so easily available, you can get it at the click of a button. So why would it not be difficult? Yes, it's air pollution, it's smog, and it is a system. Can we all agree that the question is focusing on a system? A system. Yes. Let us look at the second one. Explain the mechanism and occurrence of cloudburst in the context of the Indian subcontinent. Discuss two relevant examples. The mechanism and occurrence of cloudburst. Again, a system you are asked to explain. Discuss the types of organized crime. So this is a different type of system. This is a different type of social system. An organized criminal network is nothing but a different type of social system. It exists in almost all societies. Why does it exist in India? What makes it unique in India? What tools do we have to combat it? You may have heard about some recent legislations which have occurred in India, prevention of organized crimes, and very important legislation and policy initiatives have been taken for it. Discuss the linkages between terrorists and organized crime that exist at the national and international level. Gaurav says PMLA, Prevention of Money Laundering Act, is one thing. Now there is particular legislations on organized crime. After that very famous case, which I will leave you to guess, which happened this year. A famous, yes, Pota, a famous singer was murdered and he was part of an organized crime network, allegedly. And so these things then all of a sudden become important. The point is, the only point here is, do you understand that it is asking you about systems for the most part? I mean, bear with me. It may seem like this is all very general. I am going to get more specific as I go along. You understand the idea that there are systems? Now, easy to understand. You say yes. You say yes. Yes, Seema, Vijay also says yes. But how will you use this now in your preparation? Easier said than done. How will it affect your preparation? How does it help you in doing what you need to do now? For one thing, I will stop you here for a minute, and I will emphasize this. I will urge this, caution. This cannot be achieved directly. These questions, this level of knowledge is one level up from factual knowledge. And that is my second point. That is my other point, which I'll tell you about. Most questions are about interdependencies between systems. I'm going to show you a few questions. I want you to identify which systems are being mentioned about, what interdependencies are being mentioned. Many of my students here, all of you bright young people here, may have attended a masterclass or two of mine about essay writing, and you may know that we tend to divide an essay into two things when we begin analyzing it. We say essay is about thing one or essay is about thing two, and then we start to analyze it. That's usually what happens, correct? I'm asking a similar question in the context of these questions. What two systems is this question about? Describing the distribution of rubber producing countries indicate the major environmental issues faced by them. Which two systems are being spoken about, which need to be analyzed, having an impact on each other? How does X impact Y? What is X and Y? Simple question. Nothing but it should not take you a minute, not more than a minute. A second perhaps. What two systems are there? Yes, rubber production and environment. Yes, correct. Yashasvi, Anushri, yes, of course. This is too easy. Correct. Can you identify the systems mentioned in 16, in question number 16? Yes, you are all correct. I understand. I want to just train you to identify these when you see a question. That's why we are doing this. Mention the significance of straits and isthmus in international trade. Which two systems are being spoken about? Now here you might want to be slightly more careful. Which two systems are being spoken? Yes, very nice. Sanjay, Lala, Nagendra. Yes, correct. You may use different words, but you understand it. Economy, yes, perfect. Economy and geography, very good. That is what is happening. Yes, correct. Correct. Okay. What about the next one? Question 17. The troposphere is a very significant atmospheric layer that determines weather processes. Now, this is slightly more subtle. Which two systems are being, is it asking you to compare? It is the troposphere is, of course, one system. Yes. Weather is a different system. Yes, they are both concepts of geography. I mean, surely that the Earth has an atmosphere. It has had an atmosphere for millions of years. It is not always obvious how the atmosphere influences the weather, is what we experience on the surface. It's a different phenomena. It's a different system. It's a different thing, which scientists want to predict. There are all sorts of mechanisms. In fact, this year there was another question about weather and climate. Indian Meteorological Department issues multicolored warnings about weather systems. Why are they using those color coding systems? What do they mean? And that was a system about, it was a question about a different type of system. Now, this question, for instance, you understand, is about the troposphere and the impact it has on the weather. Now, weather is not climate. Weather is different from climate. Weather is a long-term phenomena, right? You understand how it works? There is a difference. Now that we are doing it, let us do the last one also. What is the last one? What are the systems being compared in the last question? Analyze the salience. What is being spoken about? Analyze the salience of sect in Indian society vis-a-vis caste, region, and religion. It is obviously nested in this one larger system of society, obviously. But there are different phenomena, different social phenomena that you are being asked to compare. You are correct. Obviously, you are correct. You are correct because you are smart. Yes, you are right, Maharishi. Climate is long term, weather is short term. Correct. Again, I took 4 questions in sequence, and all of them are asking you to compare 2 different types of systems. Is that appreciable? Do you take the key insight that I'm trying to tell you? If it is happening in 4 questions consecutively, and it happened in the previous sets of questions we saw that the question said architecture, social structure, compare. How does one influence or impact the other? We saw another one similarly. There we have a few more. This is what you can expect. This trend will always continue. This is what you can expect in answer writing. Let us keep this insight with us for now. Assume that when we will be writing answers a few months down the line, or a few weeks down the line, or perhaps a few days down the line, we'll be analyzing and comparing different systems. What does that mean for us? What does it mean for you? It means you need to understand the systems first. You need to know the factual, basic understanding of those systems first. You can't move a muscle without understanding any of these systems. Correct? So the amount of factual knowledge required is very high. It's not low. It is not commonsensical. It is not general. And the language to be used is also not commonsensical or general. Is that proved? Is that appreciable? I will move. This is the biggest insight that I have been able to understand. And I'll tell you something interesting which happened in my third attempt. Every year I would write mains, and in my third attempt, second attempt, I was skeptical of something. And what the pattern that they would follow is they would ask you to write very short notes, 20 words, 50 words. Sometimes they do that even now. Right? The short notes were simple 1-word keywords. They would just drop some keywords. This missile, that missile, this technology, that international organization. They will give you an abbreviation, write a short note. Now, nowhere is it clarified what should be contained in the short note. In 20 words, 50 words, what can you possibly write? I can choose to write about the factual details of that phenomena. I can tell them what the missile is, how long it is, where it will, what range it has, what technology was used. But I can also tell them one important thing. I did the experiment in my third attempt with this principle. Immediately, 30 more marks in GS with the same level of knowledge. Immediately. Interesting thing also to add to this. I had this friend who was also attempting the exam with me. His name is also Ravi. His name is Ravi Singh. Ravi Singh was a friend, and we used to meet sometimes in classes and stuff while preparing. Now, when I cleared the exam that year, he met me and he asked what he should be doing. He already knew a lot because he was experienced. I gave him this idea and I said, whether or not the question is asking, you write about the implications it has on India. So, for instance, the question says Agni missile or something, BrahMos missile, Agni missile. I say, yes, the Agni missile is this long range ballistic missile, etc., etc. With its inception into the Indian arsenal, it completes the nuclear triad, which brings strategic safety to our immediate Indian Ocean region. That's all, nothing more. I add a simple line of significance of implication, which gives it a better meaning. There was no reason for me to get 30 extra marks, but you combine the impact over a number of questions and you end up with those results. That year, it was one of the best marks in GS. Right. There is a bias in the questions in the UPSC about implications. Every time, all times, I notice it. Can you tell me what it is emphasizing on? Read this question. Let's try to read this question. The right of children to free and compulsory education Act 2009 remains inadequate in promoting incentive-based system for children's education without generating awareness about the importance of schooling. Analyze. How will I2U2, India, Israel, UN, USA grouping transform India's position in global politics? The word emphasis is not mentioned. But can you see that the thrust of the question is on the implication, is on the impact? Is that visible to you? Can you appreciate that? Yes, Sairam, you're right. I mean, yes, that is the idea of surely. But the implications. How does I2U2 change? And these are just two questions. You will notice this trend on every single question, almost every single question. Even that history question about medieval temple architecture and social structures, how does one impact the other? What is the implication? In many questions, I notice they will directly ask, what is the implication for this for India? What is the implication of this new forum for India? What is the implication of this technology for India? Right? Again, that is another trend. Now, these were the basic trends which I have mentioned that I'll tell you. Now, important warning, which I left in between. You see, this factual matrix is the base. We need to have the knowledge of whatever system it is talking about. Obviously. And by the time you clear prelims, you will have that knowledge. But that is not enough. It doesn't end there. They go beyond it. They want you to analyze it and have something which is called working knowledge of that topic or that subject. That working knowledge is practical knowledge. Now, you need the academic knowledge. Nobody is saying that you can ignore it, because obviously the questions are not easy. But you need to be able to analyze these different systems. So, regardless of these, and I am issuing this warning, this cautionary note now, because when I now go further, I will be suggesting some, you might call them cheat codes. You might call them shortcuts. I don't want you to ignore the factual matrix. There is no way that you can clear this exam without a very wide knowledge network. regardless of how many hacks or insights I can give you. It will not affect things. However, just the factual knowledge alone may not be enough. You've seen that from the nature of the questions themselves. Moving on. This is one writing sample from a student who wrote mains this year. I will not reveal the name. I will also not reveal the result. But this is what you could typically expect from a bright student, from a good student. Would you like to see what they write? Let's try to read this. See what they write. Suggestions to deal with issues plaguing supply chain and FPIs. Elimination of middlemen through contract farming. Expenditure on public infrastructure, especially in rural areas, by setting up food parks and processing centers for a cluster of villages. Use of blockchain technique during transport and perishable goods to ensure accountability. Public investment in R&D, AI-based seed quality categorization, development of cold storage, better transport, sustainable organic farming, etc. Let me show you another one. This is another, it's just a page from her answer sheet. She is writing about pressure groups. Pressure groups are also help in shaping public opinion and using judicial administration for sentencing or interests of public. Example, sexual harassment guidelines were actively advocated by pressure groups. Shortcomings. Pressure groups can sometimes propagate extremism on the lines of narrow interest, etc., etc. This is the type of format that you can expect. The important, interesting, key thing to observe. Mostly points, mostly categorized into very clear structures, shortcomings, merits, demerits, pros and cons. That is the way they execute the whole exam. Mostly people write points in this. There is a better way. There is nothing wrong with this, nothing wrong with it at all. But you can see that they are using the factual information they have and just trying to mold it to fit the requirement of the question, but they're not necessarily producing something very, very, very good, which we will see how that works. Now, let's come to the next part. And here, you can, yes, you're going to write an introduction to a question very soon, right? The skills required. I've mentioned that the skill required is the reason I put Lakshmikant here just as a template and as an example that there is no escaping from the factual knowledge. I've already mentioned it. I will not repeat it. This point is very interesting. Please do listen to this carefully. I will demonstrate this point in some detail. What type of language is used or is needed for the entire mains exam? I am only on GS 1, 2, and 3 today. I will not be mentioning or detailing essay ethics optional paper because those are dealt with separately, as you know. GS 1, 2, 3, the core, the actual bane of most aspirants. What type of language is being used is required. I have understood and I believe that at least 6 types of languages are used in the mains exam. At least 6 types. When I say language, I mean the lingo, the verbiage, the vocabulary, the way of writing the language, not only vocabulary. And I will, the simple and crisp is not what I'm saying. No, not this. This is the quality of your expression. That will come in expression. I am on language. Let me show you that. Let me explain this to you. I will explain this to you in some detail. So, supposing you find something in, say, polity. Suppose there is a question in polity. The question says, and this is a real question from this year, environment, the constitutionalization of environment is one of the best things that has happened in post-independence India in India's jurisdiction, India's legal jurisprudence context and environment. When you write questions about polity or governance, there is a certain tone and a certain language which is used. I will read out some of that language. We will go into the subjects when I'll do this. I'm just giving you a very brief introduction of what I mean. When they ask you a question about temple architecture and social structures, there is a particular type of language which historians use. I am not talking about the core academic knowledge, but there is a way that is used, a certain vocabulary that is used to write about economics, to write about history, to write about security. Particular different type of language is used. Definitely, you will notice this if you read an editorial about international relations, geostrategic relations, multi-sectoral partnerships. These are not empty words. These are just words that subdiscipline uses to highlight. That language use is important. No one language is being used in the entire UPSC paper. A certain level of expertise, not too much, not technical expertise, but certain linguistic expertise is required. 6 type of languages are required. You need to pick up basic you get a feel of a subject or a vocabulary or a writer when you read them long enough. If you read this book long enough, for instance, this is D.D. Basu, I will be reading something from it today. If you read this book, or if you read Bipin Chandra, you understand that it has an impact and the words that are frequently used get assimilated. That is the type of language I am referring to. I will walk you through each one of these in a few minutes. I will be reading and giving you examples of what type of language it is. But the key takeaway is that some academic rigor in 6 areas or 6 disciplines is required. So you need to be able to borrow from these areas this language and implement them in the answers. That is important. I will tell you what this is. I've already covered this. I won't get into the details of the interrelationships between systems. Suffice it to say that it is extremely important. Now comes the question that you were just mentioning about clear, crisp language, etc. So that's, of course, you're correct. You're absolutely correct. That is there. But this is that point. Let us read what the student writes. This student is answering a question about constitutional remedies. The question says, constitutional remedies are available to citizens through the Supreme Court and High Courts under the Indian Constitution. Highlight the jurisdiction of both the courts in this perspective by explaining the significant differences in their powers. Constitutional remedies are available to citizens through the Supreme Court and the High Court through the Indian Constitution. Highlight the jurisdiction of the courts by explaining the significant differences. Judiciary of India is the ultimate protector of the rights of the people. Article 32 and Article 226 provide constitutional remedies to the people of India. Symmetry and asymmetry. Do you think this is an example of very good expression? What this student has written. Do you think this was an example of very good expression given the question that was asked? And by the way, this is a test, coaching institute test series question, not at the level that the UPSC will ask. It was a pretty, I would say, rather straightforward question. It's about simply the writ jurisdiction of High Court and Supreme Court, nothing more than that. Easy, I would say. But the expression, of course, can be improved. Let us agree that it can be improved. The student is brilliant. The student has enough factual understanding to distinguish between the writ jurisdiction, perhaps from memory only, but here, see what I'm again trying to demonstrate. See, the factual basis of his or her knowledge is clear, but the expression is not quite there, is it? Are you now ready to write an introduction? No more than 20-30 words. Please write an introduction about this question. Write in 20-30 words how you would begin your answer to this question and write it in the chat box. I will see. Let us see. elucidate the relationship between globalization and new technology in a world of scarce resources with special reference to India. This is another question from this year. Names. I am deliberately not going into the details of the content yet because now is not the time. It is the time, however, to understand how to deal with these as an overview. We don't want the answer. We want to know how you will answer this question or how you will begin to answer this question. What would you write? What would be your introduction, which would, upon reading, give me the crux of the analysis of the answer? It should not be a repetition of what I am seeing here in the question, right? It should add some value. It has to add some value because it is 150 words, and 150 words is no more than 10 or 15 sentences. So a regurgitation or a repetition of the question is certainly not the best idea. What would be your introduction? Take a minute. Take a minute and write it. Write it now. With globalization and tech development, the world has become a global village. Sanjoli. Not bad. Sanjoli, can you add an element of analysis to this statement based on what it is mentioned there? See, scarce resources is mentioned there. Your introduction does not say anything about scarce resources. You describe globalization and the world, but what about scarce resources? I mentioned, I said it will be about two systems. It's about the fact that the resources are not abundant and globalization. Globalization and technology versus scarce resources is the crux. With focus on India. Shubham says, introduction, I will define globalization. Shubham, we can do better than that. We can do much better than that. Yes, you can define, of course, it would not be wrong, but it wouldn't be phenomenal also. Definition first and then comparisons, Pandana. Pandana, see, that is basic. Yes, but I agree with your thought process. But that is not what I want you to write when you arrive at that level. Right now, it's fine, no problem. You define, you create basic introductions, you write subheadings, no problem at all. Ultimately, we want something more sophisticated. Ultimately, we want something better. Sonia says, let us see what you have written. Globalization has shrunken the world. The word is shrunk, Sonia. Globalization has shrunk the world, but in India, where so many people are poor, that what they need is not the technology, but food first. It is rather increasing digital divide. Can be better. Could be much better. But it's a good try. Globalization is about connecting people everywhere, and technology is a tool. What about scarce resources? Why isn't scarcity at all being mentioned in your introduction? The whole question is about that. It's less about India and globalization, more about scarcity, more about how technology can create scarcity or how it can reduce scarcity in India in globalization under the general umbrella of globalization, that globalized world that we live in. Nitish is saying globalization refers to global integration of economy, which aims at establishing optimal utilization of all resources. Yes, Shubham, yes, globalization is based around that. But what about scarcity? What about Priyanka? It's good, I would say. Mikhail, India is one of the emerging markets in technology, although with scarce resources, the role of India is going to be very important. Okay. All right. Rahul Varun, you say Rahul, in fact, is one of the very experienced aspirants, very experienced student. According to Anthony Giddens, globalization is interdependence of economies and societies. With the advent of technology, the world has become a global village. With 8 million people on planet, resources are currently scarce. To write about globalization by the help. Globalization opens the gate to all economies to reach outside. All right. Shrikant, Rajat, Amrita, Sanjay Singh, Phenomena. Okay. Swaraj, Jamal, modern technology has become the heart of the human being these days. Shrilatha, Deep, Vijay, Sunny, Nikita. Marshi, this is good. I mean, it's a nice, pithy statement, but would you consider it as an introduction to this? Anaswara, you say globalization and the innovation has made the world a global village, whereas the countries with plenty of strategic resources make their economy grow by establishing strategic trade relations that are facing shortage. Even India benefit to good amount of benefit to the global. More globalization. Payal, you say Amrita. All right. Can I try? Uh, can I take a shot at this? Let me see. I have not prepared this. I will just simply try extempore to create an introduction for it. You let me know if I can try. Sanjay says yes, I can try. So the question says elucidate the relationship. First of all, it is asking me to elucidate the relationship between globalization and technology in the context of scarce resources with special reference to India. What can I do here? What can I do with it? What can I write in the introduction to give it a holistic look, to give it to actually make it more tangible, not only to define the terms, to explain the terms, but to make it substantive, so that I actually say something in it. I say something which is actually good and valuable. What could I possibly say in it? Elucidate the relationship between globalization and new technology in a world of scarce resources with special reference to India. Technology usually tends to make the world smaller. In a world fighting with climate change, overpopulation, and globalization, the inevitable trend towards more and more consumption is a threat to us all, particularly for India, where an emerging population requires more support from the state under the umbrella of collective responsibility. In a time where climate change and global warming force us to take stock of depleting resources, India stands at the threshold of a changing world and can take the leadership in this context. That's it. Does that make sense? I have not prepared this. I am just saying it. Extempore. Did it make sense? Does it bring something to the table apart from the question? Does it add something new? Repeat, or I don't know if I can repeat. I can try. Yes, yes, green technology, 100%. Scarce resources, the answer is not complete without a mention of climate change, global warming. Nothing is a better enabler of new technology in globalization with this whole debate about climate change and all going. India is at the center of it. This question is not complete without that environmental dimension. I'm telling you that. It is not about which scarce resource are we talking about at all. That scarce resource is fundamentally fossil fuels. Fossil fuels have to be in any ways given away, done away with. In any ways, we need emerging technologies. If we don't do away with that scarce resource, if we don't eliminate that from our menu of energy sources, who will suffer the most? India will suffer the most. Countries like India that are in a developing area, particularly in tropical regions, where climate change and global warming will hit them the most, where poor people will be hit by tsunamis and all sorts of weather phenomena. If we are not prepared to absorb, does that make sense? Did the introduction make sense? I was not able to create the introduction before I scanned the whole thing in my mind. Then I had to form a basic idea of what it is. What is my answer at the end of the day? What is it? That was the introduction I mentioned, which I had. Yes, of course, you are right. How to improve, I will explain in detail. That is why we are here today. So far, now, uh, it has been already 1 hour since our session, and time seems to be flying. Time seems to be flying. Are you able to appreciate what is going on today? Are you able to get a sense of what the mains question paper demands and how your answer writing approach has to be, should be? Is that getting through to you? That's good. Good. There is plenty. Actually, when you think about it, it is a lot of content. It's a very, very vast subject which I've tried to condense, super condense, squeeze it into this session. I'll tell you about something towards the end of the session, which may or may not happen, but something interesting, something exciting. So, when I say that they want expression here, I am saying that they want expression with facts. They don't want a repetition or a regurgitation. I do not think that they appreciate it. In fact, nobody does. And they've already told you what it is that they want you to focus on, right? You might as well bring it out in the outset. The reason that you may not be able to is not your fault. Right now, maybe that knowledge is not there. You will develop. It is going to get there. That's what you are trying to do. That's the effort that you are already making. By the time you approach prelims and you solve a bunch of questions and you read a lot of books and articles, that will have formed. For me, it has already formed because I did it before, and now I keep checking the answers of others and I see what they write and I understand the debates in a deeper sense. So there is no magic. No magic. If I can say it and create it on the spot, then so can you. Guaranteed. All right. And of course, they can help. What else are we doing? Cheat codes can help, of course. Why else would they be called cheat codes? If they didn't help, then they wouldn't be cheat codes. They would just be useless platitudes. We are not interested in useless platitudes. We want exactly what works. That is exactly what I want to do. Another skill, summarization. This 150, 250 word question is not to be underestimated. It is hard and it takes time to be able to capture something in this volume. It is no more than 10 to 20 sentences when you sit down to write it. I think this introduction, which I just mentioned 5-10 minutes ago, would have at least been 50 words. So I used up a lot of my answer. I would have to be even more careful while writing it. Yes. So how do you develop this? That I will tell you. But long story short, how you develop it, first of all, you cannot begin your answer writing with this restriction of volume. Let there be a broader range. Let there be a broader range of expression in the starting, in the beginning of your answer writing practice. Let that range reduce in time so that you can be more efficient at filtering. You see, when they ask us to write 150 words or 250 words about something like that, or something about new technologies, or something about medieval architecture, or something about the prevalence of sects in India and how they impact various other social structures. This is not easy. It requires us to filter, right? We are forced to filter. Then we have to write the relevant things. There is no way we have to use points. Of course, we have to use points, but the summarization is to a large extent about filtering, about what you will not write versus what you will write. And of course, this is also, we will explain. I will talk about it in detail. Now, another interesting thing. This is something I will tell you in a while. Long story short, for those students who were with me during this mains and students who are already attached and connected with me on telegram may remember, may recall that during the mains I would give certain voice notes. I would send certain voice notes about the question paper which was about to appear the next day. So I gave certain voice notes about polity, history, not history, science and technology, etc., about the overarching themes. Like I mentioned earlier, there are overarching themes that are repeated, that cannot be done away with, that appear in different forms in multiple questions. You require mental models. They are like mental models. This one mental model that I used, which I actually just used, you will find very useful. Always there is a connection of India's debate in the environmental stage and the overarching theme in India's diplomacy vis-a-vis environment, vis-a-vis the climate change, is its responsibility. Overarching theme is this. Overarching theme in polity, particularly governance, is good governance. It again sounds very cliched. It is not cliched because I haven't gone into the details yet. What I plan to do, if I am able to do it, is to have individual sessions, 2 3 hour sessions for each of these, if I can, although that is not guaranteed, and then go into the depths of it. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is what we have done so far. We have covered quite a bit of ground, and it is now time for a short break. A short break. Take a breather. After the break, we are going to get into individual subjects. We are going to get into polity and governance. We'll solve some questions. We'll talk about the overarching themes. I will read from D.D. Basu. I will read from a lecture by an eminent civil servant, and I'll tell you what type of language it is that they use in governance, which we require, which we need to pick up on. I will say something about international relations. I will read a sample from excellent vocabulary, excellent language to give you an idea of what type of language you need to pick up on. I will say something about security, internal security, external security. I will show you the report of the Ministry of Home Affairs, and I'll tell you exactly how to use it. I'll say something about economics, geography, perhaps science and tech, and then at the end, towards the end, I'm going to give you a list and a plan to execute. And then I will make perhaps also some announcements, and I will mention a very interesting approach, a keyword driven approach towards the end of the session. In fact, I will show you certain challenges which I have never shared with anyone, and then we will conclude. That is the plan for the next hour or so, an hour and a half perhaps. For now, you've been very patient, you've been listening intently, very good. I'm happy about that. Let's take a break, no more than 5 minutes, 300 seconds. Let's take a 300-second break, and we should reconvene shortly. Welcome back. In exactly 300 seconds, give or take a few. Abhinandan, why are you worried about the difference between plebiscite and referendum today? Today, of all times? Yes. All right. Shall we resume? Now we'll get into the contents. Now we have to talk about the subjects. We have to see what type of language they use. May even go into some explanations, perhaps some conceptual discussions, not academic, not too deep, not highly intellectual also, but definitely enough to give you an overview and an idea. Perhaps more than that. In fact, I don't like to use the word overview. It sounds like we're not going to get into anything substantive, which is not the case. Hmm. That's very nice of you to say, Tanya. Very nice. But I need the break because of my throat. It needs a break. You see, my vocal cords. Let me begin then. Let me resume. Yes, Anushri, it is. I mean, of course, it's not a real seahorse, Anushri. How could it be a real seahorse? I wish I could. I would never do that to a living creature. I would never have any sort of stuffed animal or living creature at all. I would never do that. It's a metallic structure. It is a metallic structure. Speaking of metallic structures, let's get into polity and governance, shall we? Yes, I'll try, Ritika. It's not easy with my job and everything else I need to do. Uh, Monica, I do not play the guitar, but I do play the sitar. Don't know if you can see up there on the balcony, that little balcony, there is a sitar which I play played. Right now, it is not in a condition to play, but I would at times. Yes, I've played it substantively, and also participated in some competitions. Indian classical. All right, let's begin. Let's get deeper. Polity and governance. See, no, this is the foundation of your entire exam, and no question about the fact that it is super important for prelims and also for mains. When you talk about polity for prelims, don't need to tell you what that entails, right? But when you talk about it from the point of view of mains, there is a difference. There you will write. And again, something interesting from my own experience. I'll tell you. I'll tell you this. I am not a lawyer. I am not an advocate. I do not have a degree in law. But I do have a marginally curious mind. So, my current posting, my current role, responsibility is that I am a public prosecutor of sorts. I am like a public prosecutor for tax cases because I work in the Ministry of Finance. And what I have to do is argue cases. I have to be the government's advocate, you might say, the government's lawyer for certain cases. And I have to in argue these complicated tax cases in a court of law. In a court of law. You may even come across these courts of law in polity. They are called tribunals. Tribunals. You may have heard those. Yes? So is there something wrong with my audio? Yes. So in a tribunal, if you they put you in that place and you have to learn, and now you are not an advocate, so you begin to understand. You have to learn. You have to figure it out. And what did I learn? What did I figure out? I figured out the language of polity and governance is legal. There is something called proper legal language. When I do my job there, sometimes it does strike me that what I'm learning here is what my students are learning there in polity. Is there something from my insight that I can give to them? The answer is yes. The answer is yes. As you read better books, as you get wiser, you pick up on the language. When they ask you certain questions about in polity, let me show you some questions. Take this for instance. The most significant achievement of modern law in India is the constitutionalization of environmental problems by the Supreme Court. Discuss the statement with the help of relevant case laws. We may know the answer. We know that the environment is mentioned in number of places. Fundamental duties, DPSP, National Green Tribunal, all these things are there. It has been included in Article 21, right? It is mentioned in Article 20. All these places the environment is mentioned. We may know the answer, but how do we write it? How do we write it? Do you write it in commonsensical language? Do you say for this question, do you say that yes, India's achievement in modern law is the constitutionalization of environmental problems by the Supreme Court? You say that Supreme Court is a protector of individual rights and environment is a very big element which is included in our constitution, blah, 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 blah. Or do you use refined language? Now, I am not saying that you are supposed to have this refined language beforehand at this moment, at this time, unless you are a law graduate, unless you have written mains a bunch of times, couple of times, or once, you will not have this language. This language has to be acquired. Take a look at the second question, and I will demonstrate it now more closely. Right of movement and residence throughout the territory are freely available to the Indian citizens, but these rights are not absolute. What is it? What is the operative word? Comment. Comment. Let me see you comment. Let us see. Just an experiment. Can you comment on this? Comment on it in no more than say 50 words. The other question about the rights of movement. Here is the question again. Take a look at it, comment, and leave your comments in the chat. Let me see what you write. Right of movement and residence throughout the territory of India are freely available to the Indian citizens, but these rights are not absolute. No more than 50 words, 2 sentences. What will you write? Say you wish to create something, an introduction or perhaps a small passage. What do you write? Yes, Sagar, of course, you're correct. Bhakti, yes, that is an exception to the right of movement in tribal areas, etc. I know what you mean, but how do you write it? What's the language that you'll use? I am not audible, or am I clearly audible? Yes, you are all correct. Shreya, Shriti, Nikhil, you are correct about this, but I want you to write the sentence. I want you to write 2 big sentences in English. Because of its security. Yes. How do you? Not absolute, because they are enforceable and are bound by restrictions. Very nice, Sonalika. Very nice. You know, there is a word, technical word called reasonable restrictions. Had you written that, it would have been phenomenal. Very nice, but still very close. You've written better than others for now. Reasonable restriction, Rahul has mentioned. Good. It's echoing. Is my audio better now? Do you find this better? This audio? Seema, Anupam, Princey, Article 19. Okay. Though there are rights but some restrictions, Anirban, it is true that right of movement and residence throughout the country is available to citizens, but in cases of national security, subsidiary issues cannot be regarded as universal. Again, yes, I agree. Very good. I mean, you are obviously smart people. You will not write wrong things. But let me give you an idea. All right. Let me take you now to a certain portion, a small portion of DD Basu, which I have picked out. Let us see how he writes it. Let us see how the Supreme Court mentions it. Because remember, there is a mention about modern law. No, not in this question. It's about, do they mention case laws in this? No. Fine. So constitutional language is enough. So do I have your permission to read this? Can I read it? Would you like to listen to the answer in excellent language, in the type of language that is recommended? And we'll pick out the keywords. When I speak it, pick out the words that are being mentioned. Same content that you are saying, same exact point, same logic, same concept, different words, different mechanism of saying things. See, in one passage, it reads, even though the constitutional freedom of speech and expression is not absolute and can be subjected to reasonable restrictions on grounds such as decency and morality. Sonalika was just mentioning this. Now listen to this. Listen to this paragraph. Absolute individual rights cannot be guaranteed by any modern state. Absolute individual rights cannot be guaranteed by any modern state. The guarantee of each of the above rights is therefore limited by our constitution itself, by conferring upon the state is put in quotation marks, it has a relevance, you will see, by conferring upon the state a power to impose its laws reasonable restrictions, a power to impose by its laws reasonable restrictions as may be necessary in the larger interests of the community, as may be necessary in the larger interest of the community by the state. Because this word state is defined in the constitution. It can't just be anybody. Because here we are talking about fundamental rights. So not anybody can infringe upon the fundamental rights. Who has the power or authority to impose these reasonable restrictions? Can the RWA of my society or my colony impose some restrictions on my movement? Do they have that authority? Do they come under the definition of state? No. That is the rigor of legal language I want you to adopt. I don't want you to memorize it. I want you to understand that it is important right now. And when you proceed in your preparation, to take these insights. I will read further. This is what is meant by saying that the Indian Constitution attempts to strike a balance between individual liberty and social control. So, that's a good step. That's a good sentence. And it is written in quotation marks, so it must be quoted from somewhere, probably a Supreme Court judgment. To strike a balance between individual liberty and social control. In fact, let me see where this is. Yes, it is in fact from a Supreme Court judgment. It is from Gopalan versus State of Madras. It is from Gopalan versus State of Madras. The Supreme Court must have elaborated on the matter. It's a 1950 case. Case law is mentioned. Don't read the case laws, but understand the specificity of the language. Since the goal of our constitutional system is to establish a welfare state again put in quotation marks. Since the goal of our constitutional system is to establish a welfare state, the makers of the constitution did not rest with the enumeration of uncontrolled individual rights in accordance with the philosophy of laissez-faire, but sought to ensure that where collective interests were concerned, individual liberty must yield to the common good. But instead of leaving it to the courts to determine the grounds and extent of permissible state regulation of individual rights, as the American Constitution does, the makers of our Constitution specified permissible limitations in Clause 2 of Article 19 itself. Permissible limitations in Clause 2 of Article 19 itself. The state in this context includes not only the legislative authorities of the union and the states, but also other local or statutory authorities, such as municipalities, local boards, etc. So all these authorities may impose restrictions upon the above freedom, provided such restrictions are reasonable and are relatable to any of the grounds of public interest as mentioned in Clause 2 of Article 19. So not only is it being defined what are these reasonable restrictions, it is being defined where the reasonable restrictions are there. The criteria are mentioned in Article 19.2 itself. Yes. Though every citizen shall have the right to move freely throughout the territory or to reside and settle in any part of the country, this right shall be subjected to restrictions imposed by the state in the interest of the general public or for the protection of scheduled tribes. Then there is a small passage here, and that's interesting again. The expression reasonable restrictions, reasonable restrictions that we are discussing. Now we have gone beyond the scope of the question. Now we are just appreciating the language in the same thread of conversation about these restrictions and all. What are reasonable restrictions? The expression reasonable restrictions seeks to strike a balance between the freedoms guaranteed by the sub-clauses of Article 19(1) and the social control permitted by any of the exceptions in Clause 2 to Clause 6. It is to be seen, therefore, what criteria or tests have been laid down by the Supreme Court for determining whether the restriction is reasonable or not. The Supreme Court has said that a restriction is reasonable only when there is a proper balance between the rights of the individual and those of the society, where the lands were given to the landless persons as a social welfare measure to improve the conditions of poor landless persons. The condition imposed upon the transfer of the particular period of such granted land cannot be said to constitute any unreasonable restrictions. See, I know this is not easy language. This is proper legal language. The Supreme Court is being quoted. But you don't need to become a judge of the Supreme Court. You just require certain phrases, certain linguistic appreciation from certain areas. It will suffice. Take this example. Take this. Does this question seem to be a hidden question? It is a direct question. It is a direct question from a direct place, from one of the most important and cliched topics of the entire subject of polity, fundamental rights, and that to freedom of expression. Everybody reads it. Not everybody uses the right language. Okay. Now I will show you. Let me show you. For this, I will need to share my screen. I want to show you a very important, very interesting also passage from about governance. See, now what we read was hardcore polity. Now what I want to read is going to be, can you see this? Is this coming? Yes. This is a PDF I found from the Indian Institute of Public Administration website, and it is a lecture about governance. When you talk about the topic of governance in polity, when questions come, there was a question this year, in fact, how has governance changed at the grassroots because of decentralization, for instance? Notice the language: maximum governance, minimum government. India's governance models in the years from 2014 to 2021 has undergone radical reforms. E-governance has simplified a citizens' interface. See, notice the wordplay: citizens' interface with government. Brought government and citizens closer and enabled benchmarking of service quality. I have witnessed central government's e-governance models like Ayushman Bharat, PM, etc. The state government e-governance models by digital land in UP, etc. All these initiatives. The widespread adoption of e-office created paperless offices in the central secretariat and enabled smooth governance functioning in the pandemic. In 2021, CP Grams helped redress 20 lakh public grievances. The organizational reforms coupled with significant reforms in personnel administration, like Mission Karma Yogi, lateral recruitment, accelerated promotion, regional conferences, replication of good governance practices, recognizing excellence in public administration by scaling up the scheme for PM's awards, represent a paradigm shift in India's governance model. New India's strong institutions are best symbolized by adoption of e-governance practices. The best manifestation of maximum governance, minimum government policies, a digital empowered citizen. See this, what I have highlighted, it must be around 150 words. This would make, this type of language would make exceptionally good answer if say you encounter a question next year: minimum government, maximum governance. And if you were to write hypothetically, on those lines using the paraphrases. He could have simply said e-governance initiative has created a paradigm shift and it has helped countries. Some of the e-governance initiatives in the country are da, 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 da. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That is what students normally do. E-governance is, what is e-governance? E-governance is XYZ. How has it helped? Effects of e-governance, they will put a box around it and they will write the effects. They will write way forward and they'll write something. No problem in them writing points. But the language which is being used in governance is that of public administration. These words are dropped everywhere. Para format, point format, actually a combination of both is better. Para and points. Points are very important. We can't do without points. We have to be using points because the word limit is very restricted. But the key essential understanding that we need to figure out, which you need to take from this, is that we have to be able to use the language of public administration in governance. We have to be able to use certain legal language in polity. Not too much, but enough. Is that clear? Is that appreciable? Can you appreciate that? How to find? It will happen ultimately. See, most of this process is automatic. Half of the vocabulary you will acquire while you are preparing for your prelims by default, because this is what you'll be reading. What I read is exactly what you'll be reading. But maybe you will not be reading it to acquire any language. Now you have that mental module active. At least you know this is what this they put in quotation. Let me at least highlight it. Maybe I'll be able to use it somewhere. If it is in quotations, probably Supreme Court saying something. Let me use it somewhere. Let me put a mark there at least. And as you prepare, because the preparation takes time, this is not a 1 week job. It's going to take a while. As it takes a while, as you acquire the maturity and the knowledge which is required to be a civil servant, even otherwise, even without the examination, how can you function as a civil servant in the Indian government without knowledge of Indian polity? Is that feasible? It's not possible. Yes, Rahul, I do recommend reading D.D. Basu for the language, but it is not easy. It may be supplemented with Lakshmikant also. For when you talk about mains, when you talk about this type of stuff, D.D. Basu, the language exists here. Clearly it exists. In fact, too much of it exists. After every chapter, there is an appendix full of Supreme Court cases where he has quoted from. Yes. Right now, let us not get into Lakshmikant or D.D. Basu. Right now, nothing. Right now, just listen. Understand these takeaways. And then later, whatever you read, we'll put to good use. Let us also not forget, let us not confuse. When you talk about books like Lakshmikant or D.D. Basu, let us remember that today our focus is answer writing. We are here for answer writing. We are not here to discuss a book list. A book list may vary, and my opinions about book list is different. So I don't want to get into it in order not to confuse you. Let me just leave it at a reasonably healthy point where I should mention that Lakshmikant for prelims and D.D. Basu for mains is probably a good combination. Okay, we'll discuss more about this later. Now, international relations. You may have read editorials. Editorials once in a while you'll read in the Hindu or in Indian Express or whatever newspaper you read. Have you noticed a particular language that they use when they talk about international security? International relations, particularly international relations. They don't use loose language, they use particular language. Right? We need to acquire that. We need to acquire. And I'll tell you something about this. Do you want me to read something about this? An example? I have a really nice example. And in fact, it might be something which appears this year. All right. Yes. India's Arctic Policy, ebook 2022. Notice now here the language that they will use here is not legal language. It will be slightly technical, slightly scientific, but that is because it is going to talk about the Arctic. What is India's policies with regards to the Arctic now that global warming is melting the polar caps? That's the essential crux of it. Let me read this for you. Should be interesting. You can assume this to be the question directly. One of these days they will ask this. What is the significance of the Arctic to India? The Arctic, commonly understood to refer to the region of the Arctic Circle, don't latitudes, etc. is fine. Let us not worry about this. The Arctic is home to almost 4 million inhabitants, of which approximately one-tenth are considered indigenous. The Arctic Ocean and its surrounding landmass. See, now they again start to pick up the terminology which geographers use. Landmass, surrounding landmass, has been a topic of immense interest and a high priority area of research among the global scientific fraternity, as well as of importance to policymakers. The Arctic influences atmospheric, oceanographic, biogeochemical cycles of the Earth's ecosystem. Here is what you can expect to take directly from use it directly in your answers for geography. Use it directly in your answers for environment. This is the language that is used: atmospheric, oceanographic, biogeochemical cycles. The vulnerability of the Arctic to unprecedented changes in the climate is manifested by the loss of sea ice caps, warming of the oceans and atmosphere. It will lead to lowering of salinity levels, rising temperature, differential between land and ocean in the tropical regions, drying of subtropical areas, and increase in precipitation at higher latitudes. It does not say excessive rainfall. If you are displaying expertise or you are a student of geography, you will not say excessive rainfall, you will say increase in precipitation at higher latitudes. It's the same thing, but it definitely has a very different connotation and much more precision. And that is required, in fact. India is particularly impacted due to the likely effects of these changes on critical aspects of national development, such as economic security, water security, and sustainability, weather conditions and monsoon patterns, coastal erosions, glacial melting. This statement can be used in almost any question about India climate change or India's policies with regards to climate change. You could copy paste it. Read it again. India is particularly impacted due to the likely effect of these changes on critical aspects of national development, such as economic security, water security, sustainability, weather conditions and monsoon patterns, coastal erosion, and glacial melting. Indian agriculture is heavily dependent on the monsoon, as it receives around 70% of its annual rainfall during the season. The yield of staple summer crops. So you don't say Indian agriculture suffers because of farmers, The yield of staple summer crops, such as rice, pulses, and soya beans, which account for almost 50% of India's food output, are dependent upon the precipitation during this period. A good monsoon is critical for India's food security and the well-being of its vast rural sector. Changes in the Arctic, especially melting Arctic ice, can be highly disruptive. See again, highly disruptive for national development, sustainability of over 1,300 island territories and maritime features, and welfare of 1.3 billion Indians. Does my point about language stand justified and demonstrated? Is this making sense to you? Now at least we know what level of language you have to achieve. And then we can use it. Good. Another interesting area which has its own language. It has its own language. You know, all these subjects that I am going over, they are all languages that I mentioned. There are 6 types of languages required. Languages, not particular actual technical languages, but linguistically speaking, You need to have these modules in your brain when you go to write the mains exam, so that you can modulate and write these questions. So you don't use one language module and just blunt force your common sense onto it and figure out what to write about what. Because you can tell from the questions. You can tell from the questions. They are asking you about that specificity. It's clearly written. In fact, that one question in polity you saw, it says, in the context of recent case laws by the Supreme Court. So there's no ambiguity in this. This is clear. No, security is not part of polity. It is a different area. And it has its particular language, particular type of language they use. That is what I want you to pick up, that I will demonstrate. Do you want me to read and give you some insights about this? No, Jyoti, they are more than ornaments. They are not ornamental. No. This, what we are discussing, is not ornamentation. It is not embellishment. This is what you have to write. This is not value addition. This is the value that they want. This is why you get 30, 50, 35% marks. You're not using the correct language for most of the times. Most of the times, we don't have the factual basis to begin with. When we have the factual basis, we may not have the language. We require both. I mentioned in the beginning, and I also emphasized and I cautioned everybody against the misconception that this is ornamentation, not ornamentation. This is hardcore value substantive. However, this discussion is about this part. It is not about the content. That should not mean, or for you to construe, that the facts are any less important. The facts are not at all less important. They are equally important, if not more so. If you want to succeed, if you want to really do very well in this, you will need both. It is not possible to acquire both, without a lot of effort. Lot of effort and time is required. Both the knowledge acquisition and just having all the data in your head about the Arctic Circle or what India's policy is, or about polity or about security, takes time. It takes time also to then be able to use the language that they use, particularly to tailor your answers. This is the work. This is the hard work. This is the challenge. This is the thing which makes it hard, where people don't end up scoring because they don't meet the requirement. They set the bar high. What can you do about that? You just have to raise your bar. There's nothing else to be done about this. Really, it's just how it is. Divya, you remember everything like hundreds of thousands of students who are able to remember everything. You will also be able to remember after a lot of work and repetition and mnemonics. That's a different discussion. It's not the discussion we are in today. How you will remember, I already told you. This is why I mentioned in the beginning, this might be a little difficult for you to appreciate, because right now you may be beginning at the beginning stage. There are many students in our audience today who are not beginners. They are not beginners. So don't worry about this. How to deal with this challenge is what I will tell you. Right now, understand what the challenge is. You have to understand what the challenge is. We need to understand the requirement. You see, why do you start with previous year questions? You ask somebody how to prepare for IAS exam, they'll tell you, go to see the syllabus. After you see the syllabus, see the previous year questions. That is the standard prescription. Why do we do both of these? Any of these? Why do we see the syllabus? And why do we look at the previous year questions? Because we wish to understand what is required from us. Is that not the objective of these things? We wish to understand what the exam will require from us so that we can meet that quality. This is what it requires from us. Now I'm telling you what it requires in a lot of detail, nothing else. I am telling you what is required from you, what will be required from you when you appear in the mains if you want to do exceptionally well. It is very hard to achieve this level in all the subjects. let me also now bring some comfort to your anxious minds. You don't have to sound like Didi Basu when you write polity. You will sound like him slightly, marginally. But just because you are better than the others, you will get more marks, and that is all you need. It's a comparative exam. You understand? It's not absolute. Because now you understand it, you understood it much sooner. You'll be able to use it later. Emphasis is on later. It's a process. You are probably in the beginning of that process. Right? It will get easier, okay? So don't feel anxious about it. Look forward to it, I would say. Look forward to this. The acquisition of all of these ideas and concepts, and the language itself has its own beauty and it has its own power. I'm telling you that. It has its own power. It has its own power and potency. You sit in a group of advocates and you can understand what they're saying. You may say something very good. It's a dimension of life which is very important. Life is not complete unless you have that vocabulary. That is what the UPSC exam gets you, one way or another. What about the vocabulary of finance? Finance. You sit with somebody who's an investment banker. You sit with somebody who deals with shares and stocks. Do you even know the language that they use or they think in? If you don't know that, how are you going to create policies as a civil servant in the Ministry of Finance or as an IRS officer? That is why the exam is made the way it is. You understand what I'm saying here? All of this is coming from three types of experiences. One, personal experience of the UPSC exam. Two, personal experience of being in the system and working. Then creating it becomes obvious to you as you work that, oh yes, that they were asking all this stuff because of this. Now I'm having to do all this stuff. I won't be able to do this if I hadn't done the legwork that the exam made me do. Third type of experience is all the teaching and mentoring that I've been doing in the past years, and all the other so many answers that I've seen now. It's becoming clear and clear. The patterns are emerging very clearly. So that is what we are essentially dealing with. Now is not the time to use advanced vocabulary. Now is the time to try and acquire the advanced vocabulary. If I'm telling you this now, and I will not sugarcoat this at all, if you are not able to distinguish between your level now and what it might be, if you are thinking and if you are feeling scared about your level now and thinking that it will be the same, you are in the wrong race. Your level will improve drastically. You will have to have faith in that system. You judge yourself as you are now, you will become too overridden with anxiety. And somebody, I will guarantee this, somebody with perhaps a lesser level of knowledge than you, who does not make this judgment, who just carries on. Jitna ho raha utna ho raha. Koshish kar karke. They are carrying on. They will clear it. That is all you have to do. Okay? It is my job today to deliver the reality to you, which I will do. But at the same time, I have to protect you from your own harsh judgments. That is a tricky situation. Don't let it override you. Hang in there. You'll be fine. Okay? Anybody can do this. If you can do this, if you're in this class, sitting on a Saturday night, listening to somebody jabbering about this stuff, then you have the potential to do it. That's okay. That is the bottom line. There's nothing to be anxious about. Moving on. Do I need to tell you about economics? We know it has a particular language, which is actually very irritating, the linguistics of economics. But we need to acquire just enough. We need to acquire just enough. Just some get there. I won't get into it because then it gets technical and we feel a bit overwhelmed with the whole thing. So let's not go there. Let's go to something interesting. Tell me now, out of these. So I have not, you may want to take this down. I have identified about 6 types of lingos, 6 types of languages in the UPSC mains which are required. One, polity and governance. It's legal PubAd language, legal public administration type language. Okay. Nivedita, you will know very clearly when it is enough. The question is, now is not the time to ask that question even. You want me to elaborate on security? All right, I'll do that, but I'll do that briefly, and I will not go into the details to that extent. I have changed my mind, and it's for the better. This is the Ministry of Home Affairs annual report. Look here at their table of contents. This, what you see here, is in fact a really good analysis of the various subtopics which you need to prepare when it comes to security and when it comes to disaster management. Human rights and national integration, union territories, one police organization institution, disaster management, international cooperations, major initiatives and schemes. All of these. There are some highlighted portions that I had kept for you. No. We will skip this. Not relevant for us. This is relevant. Let's just read this, also actually very abbreviated. And internal security issues in the country can broadly be categorized as follows: terrorism in the hinterland, left-wing extremism, insurgency in the northern east, cross-border terrorism in J&K. These distinctions between insurgency, terrorism in the hinterland, cross-border terrorism in J&K are important. And from the outset, you are able to appreciate the language. During the year 2021, internal security situation in the country remained under control. The government of India accorded due priority to enhancing internal security. The principal focus on the internal security front remained on countering terrorism in Jammu and Kashmir, improving the security scenario of the northeastern states, combating left-wing extremism, and maintaining peace in the hinterland of the country. While the details in respect of Jammu and Kashmir are covered in so capacity building and countering terrorism. Again, here an important word. Although this word capacity building you will find multiple places in governance, even in public administration and so on. Capacity building, but it's a very important word when you want to suggest anything. Just mention this copy-paste type universal template. Capacity building. And state police forces are first responders. Another important word. To any terrorist incident, capacity building is done by the central government through regular training in the areas of intelligence collection, terror incidents and investigation, response, all important words, all important keywords. The names of terrorist organizations and individuals that indulged in activities are listed in the first schedule or the fourth schedule of the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. The central government has declared 42 organizations, not important. Ministry of Health and Ministry of Home Affairs actively participated in the joint working group meeting on countering terrorism in foreign countries. Law enforcement agencies keep a close watch on the activities of fundamentalist organizations. Another important fundamentalist organizations and groups having bearing on security, peace, and public tranquility. Having bearing on security, peace, public tranquility of the country, and take action as per extent provisions of the law. Again, take action as per extent provisions of the law. Just some examples of the fact that they have their own lingo. That's all I want to demonstrate. I don't want you to expect you to know all of this right at the moment, especially if you're a beginner. It's not a problem. How does it matter who the authors are? Whoever the authors are, what we are interested in is not the authors, it's the language only for now, which we will use after our development of the facts is done. Yes, so I will not go into economics. Now tell me which type of language will you use. So I was mentioning about the 6 types of lingo. You have one which is the legal lingo. Slightly legal is which I read from D.D. Basu, which we also saw when we read that report from about governance, e-governance. Yes. It's a very typical type of language. There is another which you will find definitely in economics. You read it all the time. It is very irritating, very factual. But once you start to appreciate it, it's actually not that bad. And if you read the introductory chapter of the economic survey, you will get a healthy enough dose of it. You may even get fed up of it, but don't be afraid of it. Okay? Don't be afraid of it. It is useful. It is difficult to digest in the beginning, but once digested and once it's usable in your mind, it's going to add a lot of value to your answers which you'll write. So let me ask you this question now. Discuss global warming and mention its effect on global climate. Can you tell me what type of language you will use, and if you heard something regarding this in the past 30 minutes? That will give us a fairly good idea of how attentive you are. Did we talk about this recently, just a while ago? Nupam, it depends whether quoting data or facts will add introduction or not, depending on the question and the data and the context. Yes, Arctic region, that statement that we read, the whole statement, could be copy-pasted here. Could be copy-pasted here. Yes. Yes, good. You appreciate now. You understand the type of language it is asking for. Yes, you understand the type of language. Yes, the statement, of course, we are lucky. We are lucky that we read a statement and then we saw a question which corresponds to it. But the type of language that was there, geophysiochemical, or all of that will become very relevant here. We can use it. We shall use it. Look at the second one. Causes and effects of coastal erosion. What are the available coastal management techniques for combating the hazard? Look at the third one. What are the different elements of cybersecurity, keeping in view challenges in cybersecurity, examining the extent to which India has successfully developed a comprehensive national cybersecurity strategy? Now, just a moment ago, we were talking about security. We were using certain languages from security, extent provisions of law. The cybersecurity situation on the digital front. We were using language like this. We were reading it. Can we use it here? Should we use it here? Of course. Of course. It's not just about the facts. Yes. Just a small demonstration. There is nothing. Now, what we need to do is I'm going to tell you, I'm going to give you a tentative structure. Okay, this is not rigid. This should not be, and it's going to be, well, quite relevant. I mean, that's for sure. How do you put all of this to use now? How do you put all of this into your preparation to guide what you are trying to do, to help you achieve this level, whatever level we have described? So far, we have described the optimal. We have seen the optimal use of the technology in the most refined types of writing that possibly there are. All of these writings that we read from Supreme Court or from Arctic or from Ministry of Health Affairs is the most refined language you can find, because they are all public documents. All of them were public documents, right? How do we now use these insights into our preparation? First is to use B1 to QRT to reach. Again, this sounds very cliched. The emphasis on this first point is there is something called hexatask method. Many of you are familiar with it. It only suggests that usually we have the impulse, like some students had the impulse to ask whether DD Basu or Lakshmikant. Not important whether DD Basu or Lakshmikant. What is more important is that before you touch the textbook, you have some overall appreciation. You have some overall appreciation of what the whole system is like. That is called big picture formation. That is the B in B1 to QRT. That's the B in B1 to QRT, big picture formation. It only gets us enough idea to appreciate the text later, so that we don't get overwhelmed with the text. We don't find it boring. It drives our curiosity. It helps us develop. It is very useful at beginning stages. It is not so useful for advanced aspirants. Beginning stages, it works like a charm. But most people are just simply too much in a hurry, far too impatient to spend any time on it, and that's not a good idea. Ultimately, they realize that after a lot of reading and hidden trial, it is this big picture formation only that they are doing. But then again, hopefully you will not do that, and you'll be a lot smarter. Then the one stands for the first reading stage. At this stage, textbooks enter the picture, and at that stage, so suppose the book I have in front of me, I have some overview of big picture, of polity, of governance, from some documentaries or some videos or some conversations or some whatever. And then I arrive at this book, this textbook. What do I do? After reading this chapter, am I supposed to be able to write like this? No. Am I supposed to be able to memorize all the facts? No. In the first reading, I only read it without stopping. I do not stop. I read it like a story. I build a narrative. I do not stop to memorize. I do not stop to quote. Maybe I stop to mark something here or there. That's it. That's all I want to do in the first reading. The second reading stage is the more advanced reading stage. There we read in detail. The second reading stage doesn't mean it's your second reading. It means there may be multiple readings in this stage. It means now you are really getting into the depths of the text. At this stage, at the second reading stage, is when you start to memorize things. When you become either prelims ready or mains ready, it depends on what you're trying to do, but that's essentially the idea. Q, questions. Analyze previous year questions. R stands for revision, T stands for testing. I will tell you something about this shortly. Use curiosity to drive wider reading, but please do not go overboard because there is an infinite amount of information out there. I have to put it out there, although I know that you already know. All right. Now, points 3, 4, 5, 6, and yes, 3, 4, 5, and 6 are the protocol. This is a progression. It's like a training program, you might say. It's like a training program of how you now build this answer writing expertise. Can you build it in a way that reduces the time investment? Is it possible to acquire this vocabulary? Like now the question that we are dealing with is how? How? What exactly is there? What exactly is to be done? Ideally, what exactly is to be done is that you start with unstructured. Unstructured means no word limit, like I mentioned earlier. Take a subject. Suppose that subject is polity. Suppose that subject is economics. If you practice answer writing in the beginning, there should not be a word limit, maybe 150, 250, 350, doesn't matter. There should not be a time limit. The first few answer writing experiences, the first few answers that you write, in this case, I have mentioned 10 answers for each subject. So if you have 10 answers for each subject that you are writing in the beginning stage, all of them should be untimed, no time limit, should be open book. Open book. Figure it out. Do any type of research you want. Read from the book. Don't copy paste it, obviously, but read, analyze. If I ask you now to write an answer about the medieval Indian temple architecture vis-a-vis the social structure, and I ask you to write the best answer possible, do all the research you want, no time limit. Broadly speaking, you can take your time to write it. Take the best possible guess at it. That is how you begin this answer writing journey. You don't start the answer writing journey with a test series. It's crazy. It's too overwhelming. You won't acquire anything. The test series immediately at your stage or at a stage when you immediately clear the prelims and you aren't prepared for this, will just constantly keep telling you where you're lacking, what you don't know. It doesn't suggest any ways to give this progression some meaningful path. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying here? This is a progression. First, it is unstructured, then it slowly becomes structured, then it slowly becomes like a full test, and then it slowly becomes a timed full test. We cannot jump into timed tests and expect to improve. It will not happen. There has to be a meaningful progression. This is what I have suggested here. This is what the text is about. Is that understood? Can you understand what I'm saying here? The first leg of your tests is open book, unstructured, subject-wise. The second leg of your writing assignments or your tests is not open book, closed book, but untimed, unstructured. The third leg should be sectional, so a test on history, not on GS2, not on GS1, not on GS3, history. And what if I were to do it, if I were to train you on these lines, I would not train you for GS1, GS2, GS3. I would train you separately on the 6 languages. I would train you separately on that, on the legal A's, and I would give you some mechanisms to acquire that legal acquisition. I would give you some good literature. I wouldn't teach you polity, because I know you'll have to learn it yourself, and I don't frankly have the time to teach it in detail. I don't. But I can train you about the whole entire procedure, about how to acquire it. I can execute this program. Anyway, whether I execute or somebody else executes, the idea is you have to progress along this particular suggested path. You may take deviations, maybe a few questions here or a few questions there. It's completely your call. It's not an issue. But essentially, there is this protocol. Let there be this progression. Don't jump into the test series. That's all I'm saying. Now, as I mentioned, an interesting approach. So far, we've seen how polity in Lakshmikant and all these subjects have this level of expertise and factual knowledge, and it has this level of clarity that is required to write these answers, to compare these systems, and to analyze the relationship. It's all advanced. To be frank, it's advanced stuff. Even I would need to really prepare for it. If I want to train myself for a particular thing, I would really need to work on it. I do not have the knowledge and the connections by default. They exist in my mind only to the extent that I refresh them, only to the extent that I keep working on them. Otherwise, they are not there, and they are not there in anybody. Not there in anybody. So, reverse engineering. Is there a way to shortcut it? Can we reduce the time a little bit? There are two ways to do it. One is top down. One, of course, you build a bigger picture. You take the time. You go through the text, come back to the bigger picture, develop more understanding, read more, test, retest, acquire that level. वो तो करना ही है. वो तो आप करेंगे ही वैसे भी. There is no question about that. That is the natural progression of your preparation. Is there a shortcut that can maybe increase the speed? That's it. No more magic is being promised. Yes, there is a bottom-up approach. Now, that bottom-up approach is based on keywords. Let me show you something interesting. Yes, many of the students would already have experienced this challenge. This is the UPSC syllabus challenge. It is very, very good for beginners. The entire syllabus of the UPSC exam or mains, entire syllabus has been broken down into these keywords. These are keywords. You go through these keywords. Most interesting element, you fill this. Many students have done this, and they have done brilliantly. It takes a long time. It takes 1 or 2 or 3 days to go through the whole thing. You are supposed to Google these words, and there is a whole procedure about how to do it. It's a 20-30 minute video on YouTube on my channel, which you can see, and it tells you how this whole thing works. This is the UPSC syllabus challenge, and it tells you the broad syllabus. forces you to approach it from the point of view of keywords. So supposing it is political philosophies, or no, let me say climate change. I will not wait for myself to reach geography or environment to study climate change. I will simply Google it and see what it is about right now, because it is clearly mentioned in the syllabus. This is, in other ways, a way to form big picture. This is a challenge of big picture formation. It has generic. These words are not granular. These are broad, very, very broad words. But then let me show you. Were you able to see that? Oh, yes, good. But then what I've done is I have now designed a few more challenges. I don't know if you're seeing this, are you? Yes. So I wanted to get into the details. So this is security. All right, security. This is basic information about security. Basic information about what you can expect from this. This is not teaching you security. It is just enough to get you what you need. Just enough. By the way, you remember just now there was this question about cyber security just now. And here is a very nice discussion about it. Not too long, just a few passages, but enough to get you the appreciation. By the way, organized crime and drug trafficking, something we encountered just a few minutes ago. Just a few minutes ago. Here you will find the internal security keyword analyzer challenge. How does this keyword analyzer challenge work? I explain it here. And here is your list of keywords for security. This is a list of keywords for security. And what you are supposed to do is basically Google it and then spend about 5 minutes, no more than 5 minutes on each. Google it, check its Google images, check Google News. Check Google News for it. See why it was in Google News. That will get you in touch with what's happening. Cybersecurity threats India. See, if I was to analyze this, I took it, if I was to put it in Google, cyber threats India, this is my Google search word, cyber threats India, it would automatically lead me to some relevant content. Counter terrorism India. I just saw a question about the nexus of organized crime and terrorism. I just saw a question on internal security. I would find that information here. At least to some extent, I would find it. So I don't have to wait to read a full book about it, and maybe when this chapter comes, I'll figure out the details. I can simply go ahead and search these keywords and get a lot of information from this. Here again, POTA. This was again very much part of our discussions today. Just an example. It's not visible. How come? I will try again. Is this not visible? Okay, now it will be visible. Now this is visible. Is it visible? The whole screen, it is not visible. So this was the UPSC syllabus challenge that I was mentioning. It has the keywords of the entire UPSC syllabus, all the main keywords, but the keywords are not very, very specific. They are at this level only. Cyclone, climate change. You Google cyclone, you will find some important information about it. It will give you an overview, but not the exact level of detail that you may require. Okay, obviously. Then I wanted to get into the details of now I understand why it was not visible. It will be visible now. I was telling you about security. So here is a security challenge that I was designing. It actually contains a number of challenges. So I tell you something about security, and then this one is about external security. So external security tells you a thing or two about it. And maritime security, by the way, there was a question about this time. Anyway, Militarization of space. I expect there to be a question about this soon. We'll see. Then the same thing that we did in the UPSC syllabus challenge, I have designed a list of keywords here. This is the list of keywords that you see, that you Google these and you will find a lot of the important events or keywords get crisscrossed here. You'll come across a lot of important information. This is a keyword list that I created. Don't ask me why I created it. Long story. Long story. Let me show you another thing. Here's a similar one on geography. This is the geography challenge that I was creating. This is an interesting challenge. This is the Wiki Read challenge. You know, you were asking about how to acquire this language faster. I identified some very interesting. I've identified some very interesting articles. I'm going to tell you this, and let me in fact show it to you. It'll take a minute, but it's very interesting. You can see this Wikipedia page. See this Wikipedia page here. Simple page, nothing fancy, geography of India. All right. The Wiki Read challenge is that I will give you certain Wikipedia pages. Not all of them are useful. Some of them are very useful. And I want you to read them properly. It says India is situated north of the equator, so and so and so. It is the 7th largest country in the world with a total area of so and so. India measures whatever. On the south, it projects into is bounded by the Indian Ocean. Now, as I take my cursor over the Indian Ocean, this appears. I just read it. Indian Ocean is the 3rd largest of the world's 5 oceanic divisions. Approximately 19.8% of the water on Earth's surface. It is bound by Asia to the north, Africa to the west, Australia to the south. I know this obviously. In contrast, the Arabian Sea. Now, Arabian Sea, what is it? It's a region of the northern Indian Ocean bounded by the north by Pakistan, Iran, Gulf of Oman, on the west by so and so and so. All right. Lakshadweep Sea. It is a body of water bordering India, the Maldives, and Sri Lanka. Imagine a question in prelims. It says Lakshadweep Sea, which of the following countries border the Lakshadweep Sea? Maldives, India, Sri Lanka, A, B, C, A or B, B or C, A, B or C. Something like that, you know. It is located to the southwest of Karnataka, etc., etc. Bay of Bengal, same thing. The idea is, the challenge is to read the whole thing by this method. Canals. What are canals? They are artificial waterways, or engineered channels built for drainage management or for conveyancing water transport vehicles. They carry free, calm surface flow under atmospheric pressure and can be thought of as artificial rivers. That's it. I cannot click on this. I cannot click on any link. I cannot click on this. I can only hover around it. I can only see the summary. And I have to read the whole thing. That is my challenge. That is the Wiki Read challenge. I have to read the whole thing. This will take a long time. It will take me 2, 3, 4 hours, maybe even more, to go through the whole thing. Because I will read the summaries and I'll go back and understand the text. Then I'll read the summaries perhaps, and that is the challenge. 4 hours it will take, but it will give you more clarity, more vocabulary, more keywords, the keyword density. The keyword density in Wikipedia is enormous. Now, another question which I anticipated when I was doing this, creating these challenges, is, you know, the authenticity of Wikipedia. The authenticity of Wikipedia. There is no doubt about the authenticity of Wikipedia. It is perhaps superior to any other mechanism now available. Why? Because it is constantly peer reviewed. It is open sourced, yes, but the information is not inauthentic. Now, with the level of scrutiny and the type of open source correction mechanism they have, the information is very accurate and updated. So that authenticity, credibility issue is not a problem anymore. So that is a lot of challenges like this exist. That keyword challenge, that wiki read challenge. There are various types of challenges for various types of lingos, or those various types of linguistic requirements that are required, that are needed, that involve, the exam and all of this that we've been doing. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is no, it is not yet out. I haven't. Only one or two challenges I have shared. Environment challenge I had shared, and the environment challenge most of my students have done. But that is what has inspired me to create these other challenges. Now, before you get excited, I will tell you about something which may be coming. But please don't get your hopes high. Just letting you know in advance. I will probably be launching this program, this comprehensive answer writing program, based on these principles, because it is not possible for me to, or you, to do an answer writing in one session. What I want to do, but if you ask me best way to train, how would I train myself? Well, I would take these individual lingos, what we call lingos, and I would delve deeper into them. And then I would execute that procedure, then I would basically execute that procedure. I would have one class like this, like we had this class. Oh yes, Sonal, there's a huge polity challenge out there, which I have created. Many students here have already done it. How would I execute this? What would I do with it? What I would do is, this class that we had, it was not about any particular subject. I require, if I'm going to train somebody, I need to have that person or that student listen to, understand the core idea, the overarching theme. So I want a masterclass on each of these subjects. So I want to have 5 or 6 masterclasses, one for polity and governance, where I give you an overview, and we're going to talk about that in some detail, and then get into it, give you some literature, then give you a sectional test, untimed, unstructured. See how you do. Then give you slightly harder tests, and then progress. And that I want to do for all of these. So it would probably contain 6 of these masterclasses with a series and progression of these tests. Now these tests, I would require the help of, I would even take the help of some of my advanced students who've written mains, so you would have that input also. And so it would be a very different type of program. I don't think there is any program like that so far. But like I mentioned, I don't think that I will not be able to take a lot of students in it. It is not humanly possible for me to check that many answers. It is not just simply not possible. I will not be able to take many students, and I may launch it. I may be announcing it soon, but I will not guarantee anything at this point because of various reasons, my own responsibilities, my job, my time constraints, and all things said and done. That is, but the fact that this program is in my head, I've been wanting to do this a long time. I'll see if it can be done in this year or not, but yes, that is the plan. Even if you are not able to get it, or you are not able to get the admission or whatever, exactly now, at least how to train yourself. You know where it will lead. You know what skills are required. You have attended this class now, and much of it should be clear for you by now. Right? And so that, ladies and gentlemen, brings us to a close. It has been 2.5 hours of constant conversation. Me doing it verbally and you doing it textually. And yes, it is a recorded session, of course. Kritika, if it is launched, then if you are in the mentorship program, then you get to know. I will announce it. 6 lingos. Let me show you while we are at it. Before I take a session, any such session, I take a lot of time and effort I put in it to make sure it comes out the way I want and to give you everything that I want to give here. So you can see the structure of it, but you haven't seen the groundwork that has to go in it. So this is the groundwork. See, This is the groundwork of this entire, this also, and then this, and then this was refined into this. So refined into this is I basically create these very large sketches of the plan of whatever it is that I have to do, and then I divide the thing, and then I make sure I put the relevant content. And these slides that you see, these 1, 2, 3, are all based on this analysis. I have to first put it out there, then I have to structure it, then I have to put it in a slide, then I have to arrange the slides, put the graphics and all. Okay, so that is uh, what happens. Now the six lingos. The six lingos are one is the legal lingo, which covers polity and governance. Covers polity and governance. One is the lingo of history, which we need to acquire. It is not very difficult and it is not very technical. One lingo is the one which they use in international relations. International relations. They have a particularly different way of saying it because their diplomacy is involved. So they don't say things as abruptly as people who dabble in security. Situation is under control. They will not say, they will say that their situation is whatever, they will use diplomatic language. The point is that they have their own vocabulary. Economics, lingo, obvious. We know that. Geography, environment, that is one lingo. That is the lingo which is used by that, was used by that Arctic policy document that we were seeing. That is the other one. Then there is a lingo for security. Security and disaster management uses the same lingo. So we should treat it in one, as one composite whole. And that's it. These are the various lingos that I require you to learn. It does not cover ethics, which has its own lingo. It has its own game going on. Obviously, it doesn't cover optional, which also has its own requirements. Yes? Yes? Sudeep, even before you answered the ethics, I have mentioned the answer. That brings this session to a close. I hope it was useful. I don't know what you were expecting when you entered into it. When I said answer writing masterclass, I hope that it has proven, worthy of its name, and it has given you certain insights which you did not have before. Hopefully, which will add much more value as you progress. These things nobody tells you, and they make the difference between one attempt or 3 attempts. It is very sad, but it is the truth. So here we are. Here we are with it. I am glad to hear that. We will meet soon. We will discuss. There is so much, Sonal, so much that is required. Well, you see, I am only one person. Can't do everything. But I'll do whatever I possibly can. When you ask any of my older students, they will tell you that. Many of them have been associated with me for about 2 years, maybe even more, 1 or 2 years. They know. Yes. Right? Okay. So that brings us to a Pragya, I hope you enjoyed your first lecture after our brief conversation today. Tanya, Shiva, Maharishi, you're very welcome. It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. I will be announcing anything which happens next. You will get to know first. Navigator students, mentorship students, everybody out there, don't worry about it. Whatever I can give, you will receive. All right. Thank you very much. You were very patient, very good audience. All the best. Good night.